Imagine, if you will, the bustling heart of 19th century New York City. Gas lamps flickered, illuminating cobblestone streets, carriages clattered, and the grand theaters of Broadway pulsed with life. This was a city on the rise, a vibrant tapestry of ambition, innovation, and unspoken dangers lurking in the shadows. And at the very epicenter of its glittering facade, there lived a young woman whose beauty was as captivating as the city itself.
Her name was Mary Rogers, a dazzling, vivacious figure. Mary was more than just a pretty face behind the counter of a popular cigar store, a place frequented by the city's elite. She was a celebrity in her own right, her charm and allure drawing admirers from every corner of society. Broadway's Beautiful Cigar Girl, they called her. Her life, though brief, was a testament to the era's promise, a symbol of urban blossoming. She embodied the spirit of a city just discovering its own boundless energy, a city that believed anything was possible, even for a working-class girl.
But beneath that shimmering surface, New York held secrets. And in the summer of 1841, a shocking discovery would rip through its glittering veneer, exposing the chilling underbelly of progress and igniting an obsession unlike anything America had ever seen. On July 28th, Mary Rogers vanished, and days later, her body was found floating tragically in the waters of the Hudson River.
Her death wasn't just a local tragedy. It exploded into a national phenomenon. This wasn't merely a crime. It was America's first true crime media circus. Newspapers, in their nascent form, pounced, their pages practically dripping with lurid details, speculative theories, and impassioned pleas for justice. Every twist, every turn, every whisper of a clue became front-page news. The public was absolutely insatiable, devouring every scrap of information, desperate to unravel the enigma of Mary Rogers' demise. Why? Because her story resonated. It touched on fears of vulnerability, the corruption beneath the glamour, and the stark reality that even the city's brightest stars could be extinguished without a trace.
Her case became a national obsession, not just for the horror of the act, but for the profound mystery that shrouded it. Who killed Mary Rogers, and why? These were questions that echoed through the city's alleyways, in its crowded saloons, and whispered in its elegant drawing rooms. The answer, frustratingly, remained just out of reach, leaving a gaping wound in the public consciousness and challenging the very notion of justice in a rapidly expanding nation.
Imagine New York City in the tumultuous decade of the 1840s. It wasn't the steel and glass titan of today, but a throbbing, organic entity, an embryonic metropolis bursting at the seams. Gaslight spilled onto muddy cobblestone streets, illuminating a ceaseless ballet of horse-drawn carriages, hurried merchants, and fashionable ladies. The air hummed with the ambition of a young nation, a cacophony of commerce, grand declarations, and whispered secrets. Broadway, the city's vibrant artery, pulsed with an almost theatrical energy. Here, fortunes were born and lost, reputations crafted and shattered, and the grand narrative of American progress unfolded beneath a sky perpetually thick with promise and peril. And nestled amidst this intoxicating blend of burgeoning capitalism and hidden vice, a young woman shone with a singular incandescent light, her story destined to become a haunting emblem of a city's dark heart. Mary Rogers.
She was known throughout the 5 boroughs, not by title or wealth, but by a simple, evocative sobriquet: the Beautiful Cigar Girl. Mary Rogers. Her allure transcended mere physical beauty. It was her innate grace, her quiet poise, and the tantalizing accessibility of a public figure who was, at heart, a humble working woman.
From behind the counter of John Anderson's Tobacco Emporium at the bustling corner of Broadway and Ann Street, Mary became a living legend. Every day, a pilgrimage of gentlemen, from city officials to notorious dandies, writers to curious onlookers, would stream into Anderson's, often less for the premium cigars and more for a fleeting moment in Mary's luminous presence. Her eyes, frequently described as possessing an almost ethereal depth, held a captivating stillness, and her smile, a delicate, enigmatic curve, was enough to captivate the city. In an era predating mass media, Mary was a phenomenon, a testament to the raw, unpolished celebrity that could spontaneously erupt from the vibrant, chaotic streets of a city, accelerating into its future. New York itself played a crucial, almost sentient role in Mary's unfolding tragedy. It was a city of breathtaking paradoxes, stately brownstones standing in stark juxtaposition to the squalor of overcrowded tenements. The grand, gilded prosceniums of opera houses casting long shadows over the grimy, dangerous alleys of Five Points. It was a place teeming with endless, dazzling possibilities, yet simultaneously riddled with unseen threats. The social fabric was under immense strain, ancient traditions clashing violently with the relentless march of modern aspiration. Mary, with her independent spirit, her public-facing role, and her undeniable charm, inadvertently became a symbol of this evolving landscape. A working woman who, by the sheer force of her charisma, managed to transcend her humble origins and become a bona fide object of widespread fascination, a topic of whispered conversation in every drawing room and public house.
Despite her burgeoning fame, Mary's daily life was a blend of predictable routine and the unpredictable whims of her many admirers. Yet, beneath public adoration, anxieties surely simmered. Then came that fateful Sunday, July 28, 1841. It was a day heavy with the oppressive heat of a New York summer, the kind of stifling humidity that seemed to press down on the spirit, where the city itself appeared to hold its breath. Mary, according to accounts, left her modest boarding house on Nassau Street. Her stated intention, relayed to her bewildered fiancé, Daniel Payne, was to visit a beloved aunt, but she never reached her destination. The hours stretched agonizingly into a day, and the day bled into a terrifying, suffocating silence. Daniel, his heart seized by an escalating panic, scoured familiar haunts, desperately questioned her dwindling acquaintances, yet Mary had simply vanished, swallowed by the urban labyrinth that had, only days before, so enthusiastically celebrated her. The initial flicker of concern swelled into a cold, hard dread, quickly morphing into a desperate, gnawing fear that tightened its grip on the city's collective consciousness. Where, the anxious populace silently wondered, was the dazzling belle of Broadway?
3 agonizing days later, the chilling, brutal answer surfaced, shattering the city's fragile hope. A group of innocent picnickers seeking respite and tranquility along the verdant shoreline of the Hudson River near Sybil's Cave in Hoboken, New Jersey, stumbled upon a sight that would forever scar their memories. Washed ashore, tragically disfigured and bearing the cruel marks of violence, lay the body of a young woman. Her distinctive, albeit no tattered clothing, the still discernible delicate features, even in their tragically marred state, left absolutely no room for doubt. It was Mary Rogers, the beautiful cigar girl, the radiant beacon of Broadway, was dead. The news tore through New York with the force of a tempest, leaving behind a devastating trail of shock, raw outrage, and profound collective grief. This was not merely another crime. It was an assault on the city's burgeoning self-image, a brutal defilement of the public's idealized vision of their beloved darling of Broadway. Her death instantly transcended local tragedy, morphing into a national sensation, eclipsing every other headline, dominating hushed conversations in opulent parlors and raucous taverns alike. The nascent newspaper industry, hungry for sensationalism, seized upon the tragedy with unbridled fervor, sensationalizing every minute detail, feeding the public's insatiable, morbid curiosity, and relentlessly demanding swift justice.
The city gasped. It wasn't a collective sigh of sorrow, but a sharp, visceral intake of breath, a strangled cry of disbelief that echoed through the cobblestone streets and across the crowded tenements. When the first reports trickled in, then exploded into shrieking headlines, a profound terror seized the populace. This wasn't just another crime. It was an act so audacious, so brutal, that it ripped the thin veneer of civility right off the urban landscape, exposing a raw, primal fear. The initial scene was a tableau of chaos. Untrained officers, overwhelmed by the sheer horror and the immediate public frenzy, stumbled through what would become a crime scene, often inadvertently contaminating it. There was no perimeter tape, no specialized forensic unit, no coordinated command structure. Just men, ill-equipped and unprepared, staring at the unthinkable, grappling with a horror that defied the rudimentary tools of their trade. This was the raw, unfiltered beginning of a hunt that would define an era, a relentless pursuit of a ghost in a city that suddenly felt deeply, terrifyingly vulnerable. It was a stark reminder of a bygone age, a time when justice, if it came at all, came through sheer grit, intuition, and an often desperate roll of the dice.
The investigative methods of the era were, by today's standards, almost laughably primitive. Yet they were the only weapons in the police arsenal. There were no DNA tests, no intricate ballistics analysis that could pinpoint a weapon to a killer, no trace evidence units meticulously sifting through microscopic clues. Fingerprinting was in its infancy, often dismissed or poorly utilized. Instead, the hunt relied heavily on the human element. Tireless legwork, door-to-door inquiries, the strained interrogation of reluctant witnesses, and the often unreliable word of informants lurking in the city's underbelly. Detectives walked miles, knocked on thousands of doors, and followed up on every whisper, every rumor, every desperate tip. Their science was the art of observation, the psychology of suspicion, and the sheer force of will. A crime scene was less a delicate scientific tableau and more a public spectacle, swarmed by onlookers, journalists, and amateur sleuths, each trampling potential evidence into the dirt. The idea of preserving a scene for forensic analysis was practically alien. Instead, the focus was on immediate apprehension, often leading to arrests based on little more than public outcry or convenient scapegoating. It was a brutal, inefficient, and often unfair system, a stark testament to the limitations of an era still decades away from the dawn of modern forensic science. The vacuum of concrete evidence was quickly filled by the loudest, most aggressive voice of the time, the sensationalist newspaper. This was the golden age of yellow journalism, where circulation numbers soared on the wings of lurid headlines, wild speculation, and often outright fabrication. Newspapers didn't just report the news, they manufactured it, shaping public opinion with a fervor that bordered on manipulation. Every minor detail, every unverified rumor, every fleeting suspicion became front-page fodder. Reporters, more like predatory hounds than impartial observers, hounded police, witnesses, and victims' families, twisting facts, exaggerating timelines, and inventing dramatic quotes to sell more papers. The killer became a mythical figure, a specter projected onto the public imagination through ink and newsprint. One day he was a phantom, the next a deranged butcher, then a calculating genius. Each edition fanned the flames of fear and public outrage, painting vivid, often contradictory portraits of the unseen menace. This media frenzy created an inescapable feedback loop. The more sensational the headlines, the more panicked the public became. The more panicked the public, the more newspapers they bought, demanding more lurid details. It was a vicious cycle that crippled the investigation, forcing police to respond to public clamor and media-generated narratives rather than following the cold, hard trail of actual evidence.
Public speculation, fueled by the insatiable appetite of the press, became a contagion, sweeping through the city like a fever. Without concrete facts or reliable information, the collective imagination ran wild, populating every dark alley and every shadowed doorway with phantom killers. Everyone had a theory, a suspicion, a whispered accusation. Neighbors eyed neighbors, strangers exchanged nervous glances, and long-held grievances flared into open accusations. The city became a hotbed of paranoia, a breeding ground for rumors that mutated with each retelling. Was it a drifter, a respectable citizen leading a double life, a foreign assassin? Was it even a single killer, or a secret society, a cult? Barbershops, saloons, and women's parlors buzzed with frantic discussions, each conversation adding another layer to the already thick fog of conjecture. Innocent people, based on little more than a peculiar gait or a late-night stroll, found themselves under the microscope of public suspicion, their lives irrevocably tainted. Anonymous letters poured into police stations and newspaper offices, each claiming to know the killer, or worse, falsely accusing an enemy. Vigilante mobs formed in some neighborhoods, ready to dispense their own brand of rough justice, often threatening those who simply looked different or happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This widespread hysteria created countless false leads, swamping the already overwhelmed police force and diverting precious resources into chasing shadows. The very fabric of societal trust began to unravel as fear and suspicion became the dominant currencies of the day, turning citizen against citizen in a desperate, misguided hunt for answers.
The absence of modern forensics was not merely an inconvenience, it was the chasm that swallowed the truth whole, transforming what might have been a solvable case into an enduring, agonizing mystery. In an age devoid of DNA profiling, advanced ballistic analysis, or sophisticated chemical tests, every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every potential clue was open to endless interpretation and bitter dispute. A bloodstain could be from a victim or simply a butcher's apron. A footprint could be anyone's, lost in 1,000 others. A fiber, today a golden thread leading directly to a suspect, was then nothing more than lint, dismissed and swept away. There was no scientific bedrock, no objective data point against which to test the myriad theories that erupted daily. This meant that the investigation was almost entirely subjective, driven by human fallibility, bias, and the immense pressure from the public and the press. Without the cold, hard certainty that only science can provide, every lead was a dead end, every suspect a potential innocent, and every piece of testimony a narrative to be picked apart. It wasn't just a lack of tools, it was a lack of a fundamental framework for understanding the invisible world of evidence. The result was a case built on shifting sands, where speculation reigned supreme, and rumor, not reason, dictated the direction of the hunt. This profound handicap turned the entire investigation into a hotbed of contention and conspiracy theories, making it a truly challenging and deeply polarizing endeavor from its very outset. The city, desperate for closure, instead found itself trapped in a labyrinth of unanswered questions, where the real killer remained an elusive, terrifying enigma.
Every unsolved mystery casts a long, chilling shadow, But what happens when that shadow falls across the mind of a literary giant, compelling him not just to observe, but to solve it through the very fabric of fiction? Welcome to the haunting intersection of a real-life horror and the unparalleled intellect of Edgar Allan Poe. In the sweltering summer of 1841, New York City was gripped by a tragedy that transcended mere crime: the brutal murder of Mary Rogers, a beautiful cigar girl whose disappearance and discovery in the waters of the Hudson River sent shockwaves through a burgeoning metropolis. Newspapers sensationalized every lurid detail. Police floundered, their primitive investigative techniques no match for a case that twisted and turned like the currents of the river itself. The public, ravenous for answers, found only frustration and fear. This wasn't just a local scandal, it was a national obsession, a stark reminder of the dark undercurrents beneath the city's glittering facade. But amidst the clamor, one mind saw not just a crime, but a puzzle, a grand, intricate design that, if deciphered, could unlock the truth. That mind belonged to Edgar Allan Poe. By this point, Poe had already revolutionized detective fiction with The Murders in the Rue Morgue, introducing the world to C. Auguste Dupin, the archetypal armchair detective. Yet even for Poe, the Mary Rogers case was different. It wasn't a fictional premise to be invented. It was a chilling reality demanding resolution. Poe, a man whose genius often blurred the lines between the morbid and the magnificent, found himself utterly consumed.
He devoured every newspaper clipping, every police report, every whisper from the city streets. He saw in the real-life chaos the perfect canvas for his singular brand of ratiocination, logical deduction applied with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. His obsession culminated not in a groundbreaking piece of investigative journalism, but in something far more audacious: the mystery of Marie Roget. Poe didn't merely retell the Mary Rogers story, he transmuted it, transplanting the setting from the bustling, gaslit streets of New York to the labyrinthine alleys of Paris, reimagining Mary as the alluring Marie and placing her fate in the hands of his literary alter ego, Dupin. This wasn't plagiarism, it was a radical experiment. Poe believed with unshakable conviction that by presenting the facts as fiction, by applying the rigorous logic of his literary detective, he could not only solve the fictional crime, but astonishingly provide a key to the real one. Within the pages of Marie Roget, Poe's Dupin dissects the case with breathtaking analytical prowess. He doesn't chase suspects through the streets. He dissects newspaper articles, analyzes geographical probabilities, scrutinizes inconsistencies in witness testimonies, and even calculates the likely effects of decomposition. He treats the public record as a textual riddle, each detail a clue, each contradiction a signpost. Poe, through Dupin, was effectively saying,
"The answers are there, hidden in plain sight, if only you know how to read them." His brilliance lay in his ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos, to find logic in the most illogical of human cruelties. This was a groundbreaking moment. The mystery of Marie Roget wasn't just another Gothic tale, it was a pioneering work of true crime detective fiction. It codified the very genre, establishing the framework that would be emulated for generations. Here was the first instance of a true crime story not merely reported, but analyzed through a fictional lens, inviting the reader to engage in the intellectual sport of detection alongside the brilliant protagonist. It shifted public perception, suggesting that crime solving wasn't merely about brute force and tireless legwork, but about intellectual superiority, astute observation, and the power of pure reason.
The silence that fell upon the community after the initial shock wasn't one of peace, but of a chilling, suffocating uncertainty. The brutal act had shattered their sense of security, but the ensuing investigation, far from bringing clarity, only plunged them deeper into a labyrinth of suspicion. It was a true crime paradox. The more they searched, the less they seemed to know. As the immediate horror receded, a different kind of dread began to creep in. The realization that the killer might be anyone, or worse, someone already known, hiding in plain sight. This was not a simple case of good versus evil. It was a sprawling, tangled web woven from fear, rumor, and the tragic limitations of early forensic science. Every whisper could ignite a firestorm of accusation, every odd character a potential monster. And as the days turned into weeks, then months, the faces of potential culprits began to blur, replaced by a gallery of the accused, each offering a flicker of hope before plunging the community back into the impenetrable darkness of the unknown. Among the first to fall under the harsh glare of public and police scrutiny was a man named Daniel Payne. Payne was a figure steeped in the kind of dark mystique that often draws suspicion in small-town tragedies. He was a local drifter, a transient, a man whose life hovered on the fringes, making him an easy target for a desperate community seeking an explanation, a scapegoat. Witnesses claimed to have seen him near the scene, his erratic behavior and past brushes with the law painting a damning, albeit circumstantial, picture. The narrative was almost too convenient. The outsider, the vagrant, the one who didn't fit. For a time, the town held its breath, convinced they had their monster.
Detectives pored over his movements, interrogated him relentlessly. But as the initial fervor cooled, the threads connecting Payne to the crime began to unravel. His alibis, though shaky, eventually held up. The damning evidence that seemed so clear in the frantic hours after the discovery dissolved under closer examination. What appeared to be a strong lead was nothing more than a desperate reaching, a tragic misdirection born of collective fear. Daniel Payne was ultimately released, a free man, but forever tainted by the shadow of suspicion, a prime example of how easily a person could be condemned by perception, not proof, in those tumultuous times. He became the first significant red herring, diverting precious resources and hope down a dead-end alley, a grim prelude to the investigative quagmire that lay ahead. Then came Alfred Cromlin. Cromlin was a different kind of suspect, not a drifter, but a man with a disturbed past, known for peculiar behavior. His name surfaced not from direct evidence, but from the swirling currents of rumor and a chilling proximity to the victim's family. The whispers began subtly, growing louder with each passing day. Was he seen acting strangely? Did he say something unsettling? In an era before sophisticated criminal profiling, the emotionally unstable or socially awkward often became magnets for suspicion. Cromlin found himself ensnared in the relentless interrogation techniques of the day, an experience designed to break down a suspect, to extract a confession, true or false. This era, largely predating the Miranda warnings and modern police procedure, often saw vulnerable individuals coerced into admitting crimes they didn't commit. The pressure was immense, the desire for a quick resolution overwhelming.
And indeed, under such duress, many false confessions emerged, adding layers of confusion and leading investigators down countless rabbit holes. Each supposed breakthrough brought with it a fresh wave of hope, only to be dashed against the rocks of reality. There were anonymous letters, boasting of knowledge or claiming responsibility, quickly proven to be hoaxes. There were individuals seeking notoriety, confessing to crimes they knew nothing about. There were even those with delusions, genuinely believing they were the culprit. Each false lead, each erroneous confession, consumed invaluable time and resources, pulling detectives away from genuine avenues of inquiry. The landscape of the investigation became a distorted mirror of society itself, a reflection of its prejudices, its fears, and its desperate need for answers. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friendships fractured under the weight of suspicion. Anyone with an unusual habit, a private grievance, or even just a fleeting connection to the victim found themselves under the microscope. The very tools meant to bring justice, witness statements, interrogations, basic forensics, were often insufficient or worse, misleading. The limitations of the era meant that a single inconsistent detail, a single misremembered face, could send an investigation spiraling into irrelevance. As weeks bled into months and months into years, the list of suspects grew long, a grim ledger of dead ends. The faces and names changed, but the outcome remained tragically consistent. No definitive proof, no irrefutable link, no closure. The initial rush of potential leads, from the obvious drifter to the disturbed neighbor, from the jilted lover to the shadowy stranger, all dissolved under the harsh light of scrutiny, or simply faded into the silence of inconclusive evidence. The case became a vortex, sucking in every theory, every suspicion, only to spit them out, unproven and unresolved.
The true tragedy of this web of suspects wasn't just the absence of a conviction, but the insidious way it gnawed at the fabric of the community. Every unproven accusation left a lingering scar. Every false lead deepened the well of despair. The limitations of investigative techniques in that nascent period of forensic science were starkly revealed. Fingerprinting was in its infancy, DNA profiling was decades away, and psychological insights into criminal behavior were rudimentary. Detectives were often left to rely on intuition, witness accounts, and the sheer brute force of interrogation, methods prone to error and manipulation. The lack of a concrete villain left an emotional void, a gaping wound that never truly healed. The killer, whoever they were, simply vanished into the annals of unsolved crime, leaving behind a legacy not of justice, but of an enduring, maddening mystery. The web of suspects, once a symbol of hope that the truth would emerge, instead became a testament to the elusive nature of justice in an era unprepared for such a profound and perplexing crime. And to this day, the questions linger, echoing across the decades, a haunting reminder that sometimes even the most meticulous search can only illuminate the darkness, never quite dispelling it.
Imagine a city held captive, not by an invading army, but by a chilling question echoing through its streets. Who killed Mary? In the annals of American crime, few cases have burned as brightly or as long as the unsolved murder that gripped the nation in the 19th century. It wasn't just a brutal crime, it became a national obsession, a daily drama played out in the burgeoning newspapers, exposing the raw nerves of a society grappling with its own darkness. This isn't merely the story of a victim, but of an enduring mystery that would shape the very landscape of American justice and entertainment. The initial outcry following Mary's death was immediate and fierce. Public pressure mounted with an intensity rarely seen before. Law enforcement, then a far more nascent and disorganized entity than it is today, scrambled to find answers. Detectives, often little more than glorified bounty hunters or city watchmen, found themselves outmatched by the sheer complexity and the public's insatiable demand for resolution. Every clue, every whispered rumor, every suspicious glance was pursued with a frenetic energy. But the trail, it seemed, was as ephemeral as smoke. Suspects emerged and vanished like ghosts. Leads promised much, but delivered nothing. The raw, unsophisticated techniques of the era, relying heavily on witness testimony, crude tracking, and often sheer guesswork, proved woefully inadequate against a killer who left behind precious few tangible clues. There were no crime scene units, no forensic labs, no DNA analysis. Each day, the hope of a swift arrest dwindled, replaced by a gnawing frustration that seeped into the very fabric of the city. The investigation wasn't just stalling, it was visibly, agonizingly unraveling, thread by painstaking thread.
But as the official efforts faltered, another powerful force was rising: the penny press. Suddenly, newspapers were affordable to the masses, and their hunger for sensational stories was insatiable. Mary's murder became their daily feast. Bold headlines screamed theories, depicted gruesome details, and speculated wildly. Every edition offered a fresh angle, a new suspect, a dramatic twist. The case was no longer confined to courtrooms or police stations. It exploded onto every street corner, into every parlor. It became the ultimate serialized drama, a chilling real-life thriller that captivated an entire populace. This was the true birth of true crime as a public spectacle. The press, in its relentless pursuit of sales, didn't just report the news, it actively shaped it, sensationalizing details, creating narratives, and whipping the public into a frenzy of speculation and fear. People didn't just read about Mary, they lived her story, discussed it over dinner, debated it in taverns. The tragedy was commodified, transformed into a national obsession, demonstrating the unprecedented power of media to captivate and manipulate collective consciousness. The more elusive the killer, the more the public craved answers, and the more the newspapers fed that hunger, creating a feedback loop of sustained, almost obsessive fascination. So why did Mary's killer remain hidden despite the white-hot glare of public scrutiny and relentless media pressure? The answer lies in a confluence of factors, a perfect storm of limitations and circumstances that converged to keep justice at bay. Firstly, the primitive state of criminal investigation itself. Imagine a world without forensic science, without reliable fingerprinting, without a systematic way to process physical evidence. Every piece of a puzzle was a needle in a haystack, and often the tools to even identify the needle were non-existent. Eyewitness accounts, notoriously unreliable, were king.
Secondly, the very public obsession, while providing pressure, also muddied the waters. False confessions, spurious tips, and amateur sleuths often led police down countless rabbit holes, consuming valuable resources and time. The media's constant reporting, while keeping the case alive, also risked contaminating potential evidence or intimidating witnesses. Thirdly, there was no centralized database for criminals, no efficient intercity communication. A killer could simply vanish into the vast, expanding frontier or blend into the anonymity of burgeoning urban centers. The sheer scale of the challenge overwhelmed the limited resources and techniques available. The case became a stark, painful lesson in the limitations of 19th century law enforcement. It exposed how easily a cunning perpetrator could evade capture when confronted by rudimentary methods. And because it remained unsolved, because the final, satisfying answer never came, Mary's murder transcended mere crime. It became a foundational myth in American criminal lore, a haunting testament to the shadows that can persist even under the brightest public spotlight. It showed a society that, despite its advancements, was still vulnerable to the unseen, still grappling with the deepest, darkest questions. The enduring mystery of Mary's killer remains, a chilling echo from the past, reminding us that some stories, no matter how desperately we seek their ending, are destined to remain forever open.
And so we arrive at the chilling, enduring echo of Mary Rogers. Her story, snatched from the gaslit streets of 1841 New York, refuses to fade. It is not merely a forgotten tragedy, it is a foundational myth, a dark blueprint for every true crime obsession that has followed. The murder of Mary Rogers, initially a local horror, swiftly transcended its gruesome origins to become America's very first true crime media circus, a phenomenon that forever altered the landscape of public fascination and investigative pursuit. Before Mary, crimes were often confined to local gazettes, reported with a degree of detached formality. But her death, shrouded in mystery and beauty, ignited something primal within the burgeoning penny press. These new accessible newspapers, hungry for readership and driven by the nascent spirit of sensationalism, latched onto Mary's story like a predator on its prey. They didn't just report facts, they spun narratives, conjured theories, and transformed speculation into headline-grabbing drama. The newsrooms became battlegrounds, each paper vying to break the next lead, each editor a ringmaster in a macabre show. They published eyewitness accounts that contradicted each other, theories that bordered on the absurd, and lurid details that titillated and horrified. The public, starved for entertainment and drawn by the sheer audacity of it all, devoured every word, every whispered accusation, every sensationalized illustration. Mary Rogers wasn't just a victim. She became a character, a symbol, an unsolved riddle splashed across countless pages, fueling a collective obsession that had never before been witnessed on such a scale. This insatiable hunger for details, for conjecture, for the thrill of the chase from the comfort of one's parlor, was the true birth of the modern true crime genre. It showed the media its power, and it showed the public its appetite for the dark heart of humanity.
But Mary's legacy stretches far beyond the sensational headlines. Her unsolved murder became an intellectual crucible, forging new pathways in both investigative journalism and, perhaps even more profoundly, in the nascent genre of detective fiction. It was this very case, this real-world enigma, that inspired Edgar Allan Poe to craft The Mystery of Marie Roget, a groundbreaking work that redefined the very nature of literary deduction. Poe, an astute observer of human nature and a master of psychological suspense, took the bare bones of Mary's murder, the perplexing clues, the conflicting testimonies, the frustrating dead ends, and meticulously constructed a fictional counterpart. He didn't just tell a story, he applied a chillingly logical, analytical approach to an unsolved crime, laying bare the process of deduction itself. His detective, C. Auguste Dupin, a brilliant amateur, dissected newspaper clippings and public statements not with a magnifying glass in a foggy London alley, but with pure intellectual rigor from the comfort of his armchair. Poe's work, a direct response to the frustration of Mary's unsolved case, was a profound literary experiment. It didn't just entertain, it taught. It showed that crime could be analyzed, not just sensationalized. And in doing so, it birthed the armchair detective, a concept that empowered readers to become part of the investigation, to piece together clues, to engage their minds with the puzzle. This literary innovation, born from Mary Rogers' tragedy, became the blueprint for Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and every great detective who would follow. It was a testament to the fact that even in death, Mary Rogers continued to provoke thought, to demand resolution, even if only in the realm of fiction. In journalism, too, her case served as a harsh lesson and a guiding light. It highlighted the limitations of contemporary investigative techniques,
The rudimentary police work, the lack of forensics, the reliance on often unreliable eyewitnesses and circumstantial evidence. It also underscored the immense, sometimes irresponsible, power of the press.
Yet it simultaneously laid the groundwork for more rigorous, inquiry-based reporting, pushing journalists to dig deeper, to question official narratives, and to pursue truth beyond the surface. The enduring captivation with Mary Rogers' murder isn't merely historical curiosity. It's a testament to the timeless allure of the unsolved. Why does this particular cold case continue to puzzle and fascinate historians and true crime enthusiasts nearly 2 centuries later? Perhaps it's the maddening elusiveness of the truth, the way every promising lead dissolves into ambiguity, every theory challenged by a counter-theory. It's a stark reminder of a time before modern forensics, when investigations were often a chaotic blend of intuition, rumor, and the sheer luck of a confession. Furthermore, Mary Rogers herself, a young woman of beauty and independence, was a figure ahead of her time. Her fate tragically intertwined with a rapidly changing New York, a city brimming with opportunity and vice, where anonymity could be both a shield and a curse. Her death became a canvas onto which society projected its anxieties about urban growth, morality, and the perils lurking beneath the veneer of progress. And so, the question hangs in the air, as fresh and haunting today as it was in 1841. Who truly killed Mary Rogers? Was it one of her impassioned suitors, a vengeful criminal from the rough edges of the city? Or was the truth something far more mundane, yet irrevocably lost to the cruel passage of time and the limitations of an era that simply wasn't equipped to solve such a complex, enigmatic crime? The echoes of Mary Rogers persist, a silent challenge from the past, reminding us that some mysteries are destined to remain, forever whispering their secrets into the winds of history.